The Sodder children, 5 kids vanished in a fire that might not have killed them. The Sodder family was Italian-American. George Sodder had emigrated from Italy and was a vocal opponent of Benito Mussolini, which was unpopular with some members of the Italian-American community who supported the fascist dictator. The family had 9 children. On Christmas Eve 1945, the children had been allowed to stay up late opening presents. At around 1 a.m., Jennie Sodder woke to a noise. She smelled smoke. The house was on fire. George Sodder woke their 4 oldest children and attempted to reach the other 5 in their bedrooms, but the staircase was in flames. He ran outside to get a ladder. It was gone. George Sodder made multiple attempts to reach his children. He tried to climb the outside wall to reach their window. He couldn't. He tried to drive his coal truck into the house. The truck wouldn't start, despite having worked perfectly earlier that day. He tried to use the garden hose. The spigot was dry. He tried to reach the fire department. The phone was dead. A neighbor called the fire department from a neighbor's house, but the fire department did not arrive until almost 8 a.m., by which time the house had burned completely to the ground. 5 children were not found. The absence of remains was the most disturbing finding. Human bones do not fully combust even in the most intense house fires. They survive and are identifiable even after crematorium temperatures. The Sodder house fire was not a crematorium. When fire investigators examined the site, they found virtually no human remains. A few bone fragments were located in the basement, which were later examined by a pathologist who determined they were not from the children and may have been pre-existing in the soil. The absence of 5 sets of human remains after a house fire is, by any forensic standard, anomalous. Fire investigators' original conclusion was that the children had burned. This was challenged by multiple subsequent investigations. A pathologist who later examined the bone fragments found in the basement identified them as beef vertebrae, not human. The fire investigator's original site excavation appears to have been inadequate. He did not conduct a thorough excavation of the site. The official conclusion that the children burned seems to rest primarily on the absence of survivors, rather than positive forensic evidence of their deaths. A series of suspicious events surrounded the fire. Several weeks before the fire, a stranger had stopped at the house and made a cryptic threat to George Sodder about his political views, telling him that his house was going to go up in smoke. On the day of the fire, a woman at a nearby motel reported seeing the Sodder children in a car with strangers who did not stop despite the fire. Later investigation found that someone had removed a fuse box component that likely explained why the telephones had gone dead before the fire. This removal was not accidental. The latter's disappearance has never been explained. George and Jennie Sodder never accepted that their children were dead. They placed a billboard on the property featuring photos of the 5 missing children and a reward offer of $10,000 that was eventually raised to $25,000. They hired private investigators. They followed dozens of leads over the following decades. In 1967, more than 20 years after the fire, Jennie Sodder received a letter with a photograph. The photograph showed a young man who she believed was her son Louis, would have been in his early 30s. The reverse of the photograph bore only the words Louis Sodder, "I love brother Frankie, pray to God forgive me." The 1967 photograph was investigated but never identified. The private investigator the Sodders hired to trace the letter's origin found no conclusive evidence of its source. The image quality was insufficient for definitive identification. George Sodder died in 1969 without answers. Jennie Sodder kept the billboard up until her death in 1989. The family's surviving members still seek answers. The case has attracted increased attention in recent years through true crime media coverage. Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenetta, and Betty Sodder. Ages 14, 12, 9, 8, and 5. Christmas Eve 1945. A fire that produced no remains. A ladder that vanished. A truck that wouldn't start. A phone that went dead before the smoke was even visible. A fire department that took 7 hours to arrive. A photograph that arrived 20 years later. And 2 parents who spent the rest of their lives refusing to believe that their 5 children burned. Whether the children were taken, and if so, why and by whom, has never been established. But the forensic record alone establishes that the official conclusion was almost certainly wrong.